The keys felt strange in my palm, heavy, unfamiliar. I stared at the shiny Honda emblem, turning the metal over in my hand, while my son Trevor smiled at me like he'd just handed me the moon. "Mom, it's perfect for you. Low mileage, great safety features, and the price was incredible," he said, rocking back on his heels with that familiar confidence I'd seen since he was a boy of 10, declaring he could fix the kitchen sink. The Buick was just sitting there anyway. My Buick. My husband Richard's last gift to me before cancer took him 5 years ago. The car we'd driven to Maine for our 35th anniversary. The vehicle that still smelled faintly of his aftershave when I closed my eyes and breathed deeply enough. "You sold my car?" The words came out flat, emotionless, though inside I felt like I was free-falling. "Traded it in, technically." Trevor's smile flickered, uncertainty crossing his face for just a moment, before his businessman persona took over again. "Look, it was depreciating every day. This Honda will last you another decade, and it's so much better on gas. I handled everything, the paperwork, insurance transfer, all of it. You don't have to worry about a thing." I was 63 years old. I'd raised 2 children, buried a husband, managed our household finances for 40 years, and somehow my 36-year-old son had decided I couldn't handle my own transportation decisions. "I see." I closed my fingers around the unfamiliar keys, feeling the edges bite into my palm. "And when exactly did you do this?" "Yesterday. I was going to surprise you today, but then Bill from the dealership called about some final signature they needed, so..." He trailed off, finally noticing my expression. "Mom, what's wrong? I thought you'd be thrilled." Thrilled. As if my Carmi memories were just an outdated appliance to be upgraded without consultation. "Where is it now? My Buick?" My voice remained steady, the product of decades of practice keeping emotions in check while raising children and navigating life's challenges. Trevor's shoulders relaxed. "Already on their lot. But forget about that old thing, come, see your new car. It's got Bluetooth, a backup camera, heated seats." "I'd like to go home now." I cut him off, sliding the Honda keys into my pocket without looking at them again. "Mom? I'd like to go home, Trevor." The drive back to my house was silent. Trevor kept glancing at me, opening his mouth to speak, then thinking better of it. Good. I needed time to think, to process what had happened, what he had done. As we pulled into my driveway in his sleek black BMW, I noticed my empty carport where the Buick had faithfully waited for me every day. A hollow feeling spread through my chest. "You're going to love it once you give it a chance." I nodded without commitment and walked to my front door. Only when I was safely inside, with the door locked behind me, did I allow the tears to fall. Not just for the car, but for what it represented: my independence, slowly being chipped away by well-meaning children who saw my age before they saw me. My daughter Melissa called that evening, right on cue. "Mom, Trevor told me about the car. He's just trying to help, you know. By selling my property without permission?" I kept my voice even. "He got you a better car, one that's safer and more reliable." Melissa sighed, the sound of her children chattering in the background. "Look, we worry about you." That Buick was ancient. It was 9 years old, Melissa. Not ancient, and it was mine to decide when to replace. "I know, but..." She paused, and I could practically see her counting to 10, as she'd done since childhood when frustrated. "Trevor should have talked to you first. I agree with that. But his heart was in the right place." His heart. As if good intentions negated the complete disregard for my autonomy. "I need to go," I said. "Give the kids a kiss from Grandma." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the Honda keys I'd tossed there. This wasn't the first time my children had made decisions for me since Richard died. First, it was helping with my finances, Trevor insisting on reviewing my accounts quarterly. Then Melissa reorganizing my kitchen because the layout wasn't efficient. Small things that added up to a clear message. "We don't trust you to manage your own life anymore." I'd let it happen. Grieving and alone, I'd welcomed their involvement at first. But somewhere along the way, involvement became interference, and now my son felt entitled to sell my possessions without so much as a conversation. The next morning, I called my old friend Diane. At 68, she'd been through her own battles with well-meaning children. He did what? Her voice crackled through the phone. Oh, Eleanor, that's beyond the pale. I know. I stirred my tea absently. And the worst part is, he genuinely doesn't understand why I'm upset. Because he's thinking about the practical side only. Men do that, Diane said. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. But even as I said it, something was forming in my mind. A plan. Not revenge exactly, but a lesson. I need to think. Trevor arrived promptly at 10, Honda keys in hand and enthusiasm restored after a night's sleep. Ready to test drive your new car? I smiled. Actually, I have a better idea. Let's go get breakfast first. My treat. He looked surprised but pleased. Sure, Mom, we can take the Honda. No, I said firmly. Let's take your car. I want to talk to you about something important. Concern flickered across his face, but he nodded. In his BMW, with the leather seats and that new car smell he seemed to perpetually maintain, I waited until we were halfway to the restaurant before speaking. I've been thinking about what you did, Trevor. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. Mom, I know you're attached to Dad's car, but this isn't about attachment, I interrupted. This is about respect. You made a major decision about my property without consulting me. How would you feel if I sold your car and replaced it with something I thought was more suitable? He laughed. That's different. I need my car for work, and I don't need mine? My life is less important? I didn't say that. His jaw tightened. I was trying to help. By treating me like I'm incapable of making my own decisions. I looked out the window at the passing neighborhoods. Pull over, please. What? We're almost there. Trevor, pull over. He sighed dramatically but complied, guiding the BMW into a strip mall parking lot. Mom, you're overreacting. It's just a car. I turned to face him fully. It wasn't yours to sell, just like this isn't mine to sell. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. What's that? He frowned. The deed to your house. I watched his expression shift from confusion to shock. I had my lawyer draw up transfer papers. I've decided you should downsize. That 5-bedroom house is too much for you and Jessica now that the kids are in college. I found a nice 2-bedroom condo that would be perfect. You what? His voice rose an octave. You can't sell my house. Why not? You sold my car. I kept my expression neutral. I'm just trying to help, like you were. That's completely different. My house is worth. He stopped abruptly, realization dawning. This isn't real, is it? You're making a point. Am I? I raised an eyebrow. How does it feel, Trevor? To have someone else decide what's best for you without asking? He stared at the document, then back at me. Mom, a car and a house aren't the same thing. They're both possessions that belong to their owners, who should have the right to decide what happens to them. I folded the paper and returned it to my purse. The deed is real, by the way. Your father and I co-signed when you bought the house, remember? My name is still on it, though I've never considered it anything but yours. The color drained from Trevor's face. You wouldn't actually sell it. No, I wouldn't. Because I respect you as an adult who makes his own decisions, even when I disagree with them. I met his gaze steadily. I'd like the same respect from you. Silence filled the car. Trevor stared straight ahead, processing. Finally, he sighed. I thought I was helping. I know you did. But helping means asking what I need, not deciding for me. The Buick was old, Mom. I was worried about you driving it. Then you could have expressed that concern and offered to go car shopping with me. We could have looked at options together. I softened my tone. I'm not incapable of change, Trevor. I just want to be part of the decisions that affect my life. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't think about it that way. I know. I patted his hand. Now, let's go get that breakfast, and afterward, I'd like to go to the dealership. To see your new Honda? Hope crept into his voice. To see about getting my Buick back. His face fell. Mom, they've probably already. Then we'll find out. Together. And if it's gone, then we'll look at other options. Including the Honda. If it's truly the best choice. But it will be my decision. The dealership was a sprawling complex with rows of gleaming vehicles baking in the late morning sun. Bill, the salesman who had worked with Trevor, greeted us with an expansive smile that faltered when I explained my purpose. The Buick? Well, Mrs. Winters, that vehicle has already been processed into our used inventory. He glanced at Trevor, clearly hoping for an ally. Your son made an excellent choice with the Honda. Very reliable. I understand, I said calmly. I'd still like to see the Buick, please. Bill shifted uncomfortably. It's actually already been sold. My heart sank. Sold? When? This morning. A gentleman came in specifically looking for that model. Bill straightened his tie. It was in excellent condition for its age, so it moved quickly. Trevor placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom. But see? It was a desirable car. You got good value for it in the trade. I shrugged his hand away. That wasn't your decision to make. Bill, sensing the tension, cleared his throat. Perhaps we could look at some other options if the Honda isn't to your liking. The Honda is fine, Trevor interjected. My mother is just. My mother can speak for herself, I said firmly. Bill, I'd like to see the paperwork for this transaction, please. Bill hesitated. Mrs. Winters, all the paperwork is in order. Your son had proper authorization. Did he? I raised an eyebrow. Show me where I signed authorization for him to sell my vehicle. Trevor shifted beside me. Mom, remember when you were sick last year and you signed those papers giving me power of attorney for medical decisions? That includes medical decisions? I finished for him. Not selling my property. Bill, the paperwork, please. 15 minutes, and one increasingly uncomfortable manager later, I had confirmation of what I suspected. Trevor had signed my name on the trade-in documents. A small forgery among family might seem insignificant to some, but it represented everything wrong with how my children had begun treating me. This is fraud, I said quietly, looking at the signature that was a poor imitation of my own. Your son indicated he had your full authorization. He didn't. I looked at Trevor, whose face had gone pale. And he knew that. Mom, I was going to tell you after it was done. I just wanted to surprise you with a better car. By committing forgery? I kept my voice low but firm. Howard interjected quickly. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone. The Buick has been sold, but we could offer a different vehicle more to your liking, Mrs. Winters. Maybe with some additional incentives? I considered this for a moment. Part of me wanted to pursue the fraud angle, to make Trevor face real consequences for his actions. But another part, the mother who had watched him grow from a headstrong boy to a sometimes arrogant man, knew this was an opportunity for a different kind of lesson. But I want the difference in value between what the Buick was worth and what you sold it for. Howard nodded eagerly. Of course, that would be standard in any trade-in situation. And, I continued, I want that money in my name only, not in a joint account or given to my son to manage for me. Trevor flinched beside me. Howard looked between us, sensing the undercurrents. That can certainly be arranged, Mrs. Winters. We'll cut you a check today. As we completed the new paperwork with me signing every document personally, I could feel Trevor's discomfort radiating beside me. Good. Discomfort often preceded growth. On the drive home in my new Honda, which was, admittedly, a nice vehicle, Trevor finally broke the tense silence. I really am sorry, Mom. I thought I was helping. I know you did. I looked out at the familiar streets of the town I'd lived in for 40 years. But Trevor, helping doesn't mean taking over. It doesn't mean assuming I can't make my own decisions because I'm older. It wasn't because you're older, he protested weakly. Wasn't it? I turned to him. Would you have done this when your father was alive? His silence was answer enough. I'm still the same person I was then, I said softly. Just because I'm alone now doesn't mean I'm incapable. Trevor nodded, eyes on the road. I get it. I won't do anything like this again. But as he pulled into my driveway, I knew this wasn't over. One conversation wouldn't undo the pattern that had been building for years. Trevor, like his sister, had grown accustomed to managing me, rather than supporting me. That would take more than an apology to change. No need, I said, opening the door. I can read the manual. I've been driving for 45 years, Trevor. I think I can figure out Bluetooth. His smile faltered. Right. Of course. As I watched him drive away, I felt a mixture of sadness and resolve. I loved my son, but I wouldn't let him or Anyuna diminish me. The check from the dealership sat in my purse, the first step in reclaiming my independence. What Trevor didn't know was that I had no intention of depositing that check yet. It was going to be part of a larger lesson that would either restore the respect I deserved or force me to make difficult decisions about my relationship with my children going forward. Either way, the game had just begun. And unlike the car situation, this was a game I had no intention of losing. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, staring at the check from the dealership. $4,300. The fair market value difference between my Buick and the Honda that now sat in my carport. To Trevor, this was probably a trivial amount, a good month's commission at his investment firm. To me, it represented something far more valuable than money. Leverage. I hadn't deposited the check yet. Instead, I slipped it into the carved wooden box where I kept Richard's letters, our marriage certificate, and other irreplaceable papers. Then I made a phone call. Eleanor. Twice in 2 days. To what do I owe the pleasure? Diane's voice was warm through the receiver. I need advice from someone who won't treat me like I'm losing my faculties, I said, attempting humor but hearing the edge in my own voice. Oh dear, what's Trevor done now? I explained the situation, the forged signature, the confrontation at the dealership, and the check now sitting in my keepsake box. The audacity, Diane exclaimed. If my David had tried something like that, I'd have tanned his hide, grown man or not. I considered it, I admitted. But I think I need to take a different approach. This isn't just about the car anymore. No, it's about respect, Diane agreed. So what's your plan? That's why I'm calling. I'm not sure yet, but I think. I paused, organizing my thoughts. I think I need to show them, both Trevor and Melissa, what it really means when they treat me like I'm incapable. I could almost see Diane nodding thoughtfully. You know, when my kids started getting too involved in my business after Henry died, I took a cruise. 2 weeks in the Caribbean. Didn't tell them until I was already on the ship. I laughed. How did that go over? Oh, they were furious. Worried sick, they said. But they got the message. I'm still capable of making my own plans. She paused. But your situation seems more serious. Forgery is crossing a line. It is, I agreed. And it makes me wonder what else they might do if they think it's for my own good. After talking with Diane for another hour, a plan began to crystallize. Not revenge, exactly, but a lesson in consequences that my children apparently needed to learn. The next morning, I drove my new Honda to Riverside Community Bank. Not my usual branch, but one where I could open an account without my children's knowledge. The young banker who helped me, Marcus, couldn't have been more than 30. But he treated me with a respect my own children seemed to have forgotten. So that's a new checking account, separate from your existing accounts, with this check as the initial deposit, Marcus confirmed, typing into his computer. Correct. And I'd like to make sure this account isn't linked to any of my other accounts or visible in online banking. Marcus glanced up, a flicker of concern crossing his face. May I ask why, Mrs. Winters? We typically encourage customers to link accounts for easier management. I'm sure you do, I said with a smile. But I'm conducting a little experiment in independence, and I need this account to remain private. He nodded, professional discretion taking over. Of course. We can set that up for you. By the time I left the bank, I had a new account, a debit card that would arrive in the mail within 5 business days, and the first piece of my plan in place. The following Sunday was our regular family dinner at Melissa's house. As I pulled into her driveway in my new Honda, I noticed Trevor's BMW already parked out front. Perfect. Both my children together, this would save me from having the same conversation twice. Grandma! My granddaughter Emma, 11 and already showing signs of her father's height, bounded down the front steps to greet me. Her younger brother Lucas followed more sedately, absorbed in whatever game he was playing on his tablet. "They are my favorite grandchildren," I said, hugging Emma and ruffling Lucas's hair as he finally looked up. "We're your only grandchildren," Emma pointed out with the literal mindedness of preteens. "Which makes you my favorites by default," I replied, winking. Inside, the familiar chaos of Melissa's home enveloped me. My daughter had inherited her father's love of cooking, and delicious smells wafted from the kitchen. Her husband Paul was setting the dining room table while arguing good-naturedly with Trevor about some sports team's prospects. "Mom," Melissa called from the kitchen. "Perfect timing. Dinner's almost ready." I made my way to the kitchen, where my daughter was simultaneously stirring a sauce and checking something in the oven. At 41, Melissa was the spitting image of me at her age, though she'd somehow escaped the early graying that had turned my brown hair silver by 50. "Need any help?" I offered, knowing the answer. She glanced up briefly. "How's the new car working out?" So they'd already discussed it. Of course they had. "It's fine," I said neutrally. "Different but fine." Melissa gave me a searching look, but was distracted by the timer going off. I took the opportunity to retreat to the dining room, where Trevor was pouring wine. "Mom," he greeted me with a slightly too bright smile. "I got your favorite Chardonnay." "Thank you," I said, accepting the glass. "Very thoughtful." Dinner proceeded with the usual family chatter. Emma talked about her soccer team's recent victory. Lucas occasionally interjected with facts about whatever he was currently obsessed with, dinosaurs, apparently. And Paul discussed renovations they were planning for the backyard. Trevor mentioned a new client, carefully avoiding specific details, as he always did when discussing work. It wasn't until dessert Melissa's apple crumble, Richard's favorite, that I decided to implement the next phase of my plan. "I've been thinking," I said during a lull in conversation, "about making some changes." 4 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of interest. "What kind of changes, Mom?" Melissa asked, serving Lucas another scoop of ice cream. "Well, for one thing, I'm considering selling the house." The reaction was immediate. Trevor's spoon clattered against his bowl, and Melissa froze mid-scoop. "Selling the house?" Trevor repeated. "Why would you do that?" "It's too big for just me," I said reasonably. 4 bedrooms, all that yard work, and the property taxes keep going up. "But that's our family home," Melissa protested. "We grew up there, Dad built that treehouse in the backyard." "Yes, and I've enjoyed living there for 40 years. I acknowledged. "But it's time for a change. I've been looking at those new senior living communities on the west side of town." "Senior living?" Trevor's voice rose slightly. "Mom, those are for people who need assistance. You're completely independent." I raised an eyebrow at him. "Am I?" Recent events suggested otherwise. A flush crept up his neck. Paul and Melissa exchanged confused glances. "What recent events?" Melissa asked. "Ask your brother about my Buick," I said mildly, taking a sip of wine. Trevor shifted uncomfortably as Melissa turned to him. "Trevor? What about Mom's car?" "I helped her upgrade to a safer model," he said defensively. "The Buick was ancient." "By forging my signature on the trade-in documents," I added. Melissa's eyes widened. "You did what?" "It wasn't. I didn't." Trevor stumbled over his words. "I was trying to help." "By committing fraud?" Melissa's voice had taken on the sharp tone she typically reserved for her children's worst transgressions. "That's a bit dramatic," Trevor muttered. "Is it?" I set down my wine glass. The dealership manager certainly seemed concerned when I pointed it out. Paul, ever the peacemaker, cleared his throat. I'm sure Trevor thought he was doing the right thing, even if his method was questionable. Exactly. Trevor seized on this lifeline. And Mom got a much better car out of it. Safer. More reliable. That's not the point, I said firmly. The point is that decisions were made about my property without my consent, which is why I'm now making my own decisions about my future, including selling the house. Mom, be reasonable, Melissa pleaded. If you're having trouble with maintenance, we can help. Paul can mow the lawn or we can hire someone. I don't need help with maintenance, I said. I need respect for my autonomy, but since that seems to be in short supply lately, I'm taking steps to simplify my life. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Emma and Lucas, sensing the adult tension, exchanged glances. Can we be excused? Emma asked. Melissa nodded distractedly, and the children scurried from the table. Once they were gone, Trevor leaned forward. Mom, I've already apologized for the car situation. It was a mistake, but selling your house is a massive overreaction. Is it? I met his gaze steadily. Or is it me making my own decisions before someone else makes them for me? Nobody is making decisions for you, Melissa protested. Your brother did, I pointed out. And you defended him initially. He was just trying to help, remember? Melissa had the grace to look embarrassed. That was before I knew he forged your signature. But even without that, you both thought it was perfectly acceptable for him to sell my car without consulting me. I looked between them. What's next? My finances? My medical care? Will you decide I can't live alone anymore? That's not fair, Trevor said, his voice rising. We're concerned about you. That's what family does. Concern is asking how I'm doing. Concern is offering help when I need it. I kept my voice level. What you're doing is assuming control. Paul, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Eleanor has a point. We should be supporting her choices, not making them for her. Trevor shot him an irritated look. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who gets called when something goes wrong. When have I ever called you because something went wrong? I challenged. Last winter, when the furnace stopped working, Trevor countered. I called to ask for your heating contractor's number. I corrected him. You're the one who insisted on coming over and handling it yourself. Because it was 15 degrees outside, you could have frozen. I managed for 60 years before you were old enough to call a repairman, Trevor. I shook my head. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You've both decided I'm suddenly incapable, and you use any request for information as evidence. Melissa reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, we don't think you're incapable. We're just trying to look out for you since Dad died. I appreciate that, I said, softening slightly, but looking out for me doesn't mean taking over my life, and that's what it's starting to feel like. Trevor ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my heart ache momentarily. So what are you saying? You want us to back off completely? I'm saying I want to be consulted about decisions that affect me. I want my opinions respected, not dismissed, and I want to be treated like the competent adult I am. Fair enough, Paul said before either of my children could respond. That seems reasonable. It is reasonable, I agreed. Which is why I've made some other decisions as well. What other decisions? Melissa asked warily. I've decided to update my will and power of attorney documents. I took another sip of wine, watching their reactions carefully. Given recent events, I think it's prudent to reconsider who should be making decisions if I'm ever truly incapable. The shock on their faces would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Trevor recovered first. Mom, that's you can't. He stopped, visibly collecting himself. Who would you even appoint, if not us? I have options, I said vaguely. Diane has been my friend for 30 years. Or perhaps Paul, since he seems to be the only one who understands boundaries. Paul looked startled at being drawn into the conflict. I'm sure that's not necessary, Eleanor. Trevor and Melissa love you. They just got a little Overzealous. Perhaps, I conceded. But love without respect isn't enough. The remainder of the evening was strained. Melissa busied herself with clearing dishes, refusing help with more force than necessary. Trevor checked his phone repeatedly, suddenly remembering an urgent work email he needed to send. Paul tried valiantly to maintain conversation, but eventually gave up. As I prepared to leave, Trevor cornered me in the hallway. "Mom, you're not really changing your will, are you? This is just to teach me a lesson about the car." I looked at my son, firstborn, who had his father's eyes and my stubborn chin. "It's not just about the car, Trevor. It's about a pattern. And yes, I am really considering it. But I have a right to determine who makes decisions for me if I can't," I said firmly. "Just as I had a right to decide when to sell my car." His jaw tightened. I said I was sorry about that. "And I accepted your apology. But sorry doesn't mean there aren't consequences." I patted his arm. "Think of it this way. I'm just trying to help you understand where the boundaries are." I left him standing there, his expression a mixture of frustration and dawning realization. Driving home in my new Honda, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. I hadn't enjoyed hurting my children, but the shock on their faces told me my message had landed. Whether it would lead to lasting change remained to be seen. The next phase of my plan would make that clear. Over the next week, I put things in motion. First, I actually did contact my lawyer, Harold Bernstein, who had handled Richard's estate and had been our family attorney for decades. "Eleanor, good to hear from you." Harold greeted me warmly when I arrived at his office. At 72, he was one of the few people who made me feel young by comparison. "What can I do for you today?" I explained the situation with Trevor and the car, then outlined what I wanted to do. Harold listened attentively, his bushy white eyebrows rising occasionally. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "Well, it's certainly within your rights to modify your estate planning documents," he said carefully. "But are you sure this is the approach you want to take? Family disputes over these matters can get messy." "I'm not looking to create a dispute," I clarified. "I'm trying to prevent future problems by establishing clear boundaries now." Harold tapped his pen against his legal pad. "And you're certain your son acted without authorization? These things can sometimes be misunderstandings." "He forged my signature, Harold," I said flatly. "That's not a misunderstanding." He nodded gravely. "In that case, I think your concerns are valid. Let's discuss your options." By the time I left Harold's office 2 hours later, I had set several things in motion. None of them irrevocable yet, but all designed to make my children understand that actions had consequences. My next stop was the real estate office of Jeanette Collins, who had sold us our house 4 decades earlier and was still working well into her 70s. "Eleanor." Jeanette greeted me with a hug that smelled of expensive perfume. "What brings you in today? Not really selling that beautiful house of yours, I hope?" "Actually, I am considering it," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "But I'd like your professional opinion on something first." Jeanette's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose. "Of course, dear, what can I help with?" "I want to know what my options are for my house. Not necessarily selling outright, but perhaps other arrangements." "Such as?" she prompted. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. "That's why I need your expertise. I want to maintain control of my property while I'm alive and well, but I also want to be prepared for future possibilities." Jeanette's expression softened with understanding. "Ah, planning ahead while ensuring your independence now. Smart woman." By the end of our meeting, I had several possibilities to consider, each with its own advantages and implications for my children. I left with a folder full of information and a clearer sense of how to proceed. The final piece fell into place 3 days later, when I received a letter from Harold confirming that he had prepared the documents we'd discussed. All that remained was for me to review and sign them. I placed the envelope on my kitchen table, next to the real estate information from Jeanette and the bank statements from my new account. The pieces of my lesson were assembled. Now I just needed the right moment to deliver it. That moment came sooner than expected. My doorbell rang early Saturday morning, and I opened it to find both Trevor and Melissa standing on my porch, looking determined. "We need to talk," Melissa said without preamble. I stepped back to let them in, noting their serious expressions. "I was just making coffee. Would you like some?" They followed me to the kitchen, exchanging glances that spoke volumes about prior conversations I hadn't been privy to. "Mom," Trevor began once we were seated with coffee, "we've been thinking about what you said at dinner last week." "About the house?" I asked innocently. "About everything," Melissa clarified. "The car, the house, the will, all of it." I nodded, waiting. Trevor cleared his throat. "We realize we may have been overstepping." "May have been," I repeated. "Okay, we were definitely overstepping," Melissa amended. "Especially Trevor with the car situation." Trevor shot her an annoyed look but didn't argue. "The point is, we don't want you to feel like we're trying to take over your life." "But," Melissa added, "we also don't want you making major decisions, like selling the house, just to prove a point." I took a sip of my coffee, considering my response. "What makes you think it's just to prove a point?" They exchanged another glance. "Because you've never mentioned wanting to move before," Trevor said. "Not once in 5 years since Dad died. And suddenly, right after the car incident, you're talking about selling the house and changing your will." "Perhaps the car incident made me realize I needed to take more definitive steps to protect my autonomy," I suggested. "Or perhaps you're trying to punish us," Melissa said bluntly. I set down my coffee cup. "Is that what you think? That I'm being petty?" "Not petty," Trevor backpedaled quickly. "Just reactive." "I prefer to think of it as proactive," I countered. "Setting boundaries before further lines are crossed." Melissa leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Mom, we get it. Trevor crossed a line with the car. It was wrong, and he knows it." She glanced at her brother, who nodded reluctantly. "But selling the house? Changing your will? That affects all of us." "That's interesting," I said, keeping my voice calm. "When Trevor sold my car without permission, that affected only me. Yet neither of you seemed particularly concerned about that impact." "I've apologized repeatedly," Trevor said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "What more do you want?" I studied my son's face, the furrowed brow so like his father's, the set of his jaw that I recognized from his childhood tantrums. He was sorry he'd upset me, but he still didn't truly understand what he'd done wrong. "I want you both to understand that I am not a problem to be managed," I said finally. "I'm your mother. Yes. I'm older. Yes. But I'm still a fully functioning adult with the right to make my own decisions, 7 ones you disagree with." "We know that," Melissa insisted. "Do you?" I reached for the manila folder that had been sitting on the counter since Harold had sent it over. "Because your actions suggest otherwise." Trevor eyed the folder warily. "What's that?" "Documentation," I said simply, opening it to reveal the neatly organized papers inside. "I've been busy this week." I pulled out the first Documenta printout of the bank statement from my new account and placed it on the table between us. "What's this?" Melissa asked, leaning forward to look. "My new checking account. Opened with the money from the car Trevor sold without my permission." I met Trevor's eyes. "An account neither of you has access to or authority over." Trevor frowned. "Mom, we've never touched your regular accounts." "That's paranoid." "Is it? You didn't ask permission before selling my car. What else might you decide is for my own good?" Before he could respond, I pulled out the next document, the information packet from Jeanette Collins. "These are my options for the house," I explained. "Selling is one possibility, but Jeanette also outlined several alternatives." Melissa picked up the packet, flipping through it with increasing alarm. "Mom, these are reverse mortgage documents. And what's this about a life estate?" "All legal options for my property," I confirmed. "I'm particularly interested in the life estate arrangement." I would retain the right to live in the house until my death, at which point ownership would transfer to the designated beneficiary. Who would be the beneficiary? Trevor asked sharply. That's what I'm considering, I said. It could be both of you equally. Or perhaps just one of you. Or maybe someone else entirely. Someone else? Melissa's voice rose. Like who? I have options, I said vaguely. The point is, these are my decisions to make. Trevor's face had darkened. This is ridiculous. You're threatening to disinherit us because I got you a better car? I pulled out the final document from the folder. Which brings me to this. What now? Melissa asked, her voice tight. My updated power of attorney and healthcare directive. I placed the legal document on the table. Currently, you're both named as my agents, with equal authority. I'm considering changing that. The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor stared at the document as if it might bite him, while Melissa's eyes filled with tears. You don't trust us, she said finally, her voice small. Trust is earned, I replied gently. And recently, it's been damaged. By Trevor, she clarified quickly. I didn't do anything. You defended his actions initially, I reminded her. And you've both been treating me differently since your father died, making decisions for me, talking over me, assuming I can't manage on my own. We're just trying to help. Trevor's frustration boiled over. Dad asked us to look after you. I stilled. What did you say? Trevor suddenly looked uncomfortable, glancing at Melissa, who was giving him a warning look. Trevor, I said quietly, what exactly did your father say to you? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard that it made my heart ache. Before he died, when things were getting really bad, Dad asked me to promise I'd take care of you. Make sure you were okay. He asked me the same thing, Melissa added softly. It was important to him. I sat back, absorbing this new information. Of course Richard would have said that. He'd always been protective, always planning ahead. But I knew my husband better than anyone. Taking care of me doesn't mean taking over my life, I said finally. Your father would never have wanted that. We're not trying to take over, Melissa protested. We're just trying to fulfill our promise to Dad. By making decisions for me without my input? By treating me like I'm incapable? I shook my head. That's not what Richard would have meant, and deep down you both know that. Neither of them met my eyes. Your father and I were partners for 40 years, I continued. Equal partners. He respected my judgment, my independence. He would never have wanted you to undermine that. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we've been a little overzealous. A little? I raised an eyebrow. Okay, a lot, he conceded. But it comes from a good place, Mom. I know it does, I said, softening slightly. I never doubted your intentions, but good intentions don't justify wrong actions. Melissa wiped at her eyes. So what now? You're going to punish us by changing everything? No, I said, gathering the documents and returning them to the folder. I'm going to give you both a chance to demonstrate that you understand what went wrong and how to fix it. How? Trevor asked warily. By respecting my decisions going forward. By consulting me before taking action that affects me. By treating me as a capable adult rather than a child to be managed. I closed the folder with finality. Show me that. And nothing needs to change. They exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We can do that, Melissa said finally. Right, Trevor? He nodded, though I could see the reluctance in his eyes. Right. I wasn't convinced, but it was a start. Good. Now, would either of you like more coffee? The rest of their visit was stilted, conversation limited to safe topics like the children's activities and Trevor's recent fishing trip. When they finally left, promising to call later in the week, I felt both drained and resolute. They still didn't fully understand. The conversation had revealed that much. They saw my actions as retaliatory rather than protective. And that revelation about Richard's deathbed request explained some of their behavior, but it didn't excuse it. I needed to take the final step in my plan. Monday morning, I drove to Harold Bernstein's office with the signed documents. "You're sure about this, Eleanor?" Harold asked as he reviewed my signature on the power of attorney form. "It's a significant change." "I'm sure," I confirmed. "But don't file it yet. Hold it in escrow for 30 days. Harold's bushy eyebrows rose. "May I ask why?" "Let's call it a probationary period," I explained. "I'm hoping it won't be necessary to make the change at all." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ah, giving them a chance to correct course." "Exactly." Harold nodded approvingly. "Wise approach. And the property documents?" "The same. Hold them, but don't file anything yet." As I left Harold's office, I felt lighter somehow. The pieces were in place. Now I just needed to wait and see if my children had truly heard me. The answer came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, I received a text message from Trevor, asking if he could stop by that evening. I agreed, curious about what had prompted the request. He arrived promptly at 7, carrying a folder similar to the one I'd shown them on Saturday. "Hi, Mom," he greeted me with an awkward hug. "Thanks for seeing me." "Of course," I replied, leading him to the living room. "What's on your mind?" Trevor sat on the edge of the sofa, his posture tense. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about what you said regarding boundaries and respect." I nodded, waiting. "You were right," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "I've been treating you like someone who needs managing rather than respecting your independence." "And the car situation?" He shook his head. "That was completely out of line." "Yes, it was," I agreed. "I know saying sorry isn't enough." He opened the folder he'd brought. "So I did some research about the Buick." Now he had my full attention. "What about it?" "I found out who bought it." Trevor pulled out a printout and handed it to me. "A collector named Edward Mercer. He specializes in that particular model and year." I stared at the paper, which contained the man's contact information and a brief note about his collection. "I spoke with him," Trevor continued. "Explained the situation, that the car had sentimental value to you and was sold without your full consent. He was sympathetic, but he's not willing to sell it back." A pang of disappointment shot through me, though I'd already accepted that the Buick was gone for good. "However," Trevor went on, "he did agree to something else." He pulled out another document. "He's hosting a classic car show next month. He's invited you to come see the Buick, sit in it if you want. He even offered to take a photo of you with it for your memories." I was momentarily speechless. It was a small gesture, perhaps, but the fact that Trevor had gone to the trouble of tracking down the buyer and arranging this showed an effort I hadn't expected. "That's thoughtful," I said finally. "It's the least I could do." Trevor handed me the invitation to the car show. "I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but I wanted you to have a chance to say goodbye to it properly." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. Trevor pulled out a final document from his folder. "I spoke with my financial advisor about setting up a special account." "What kind of account?" I asked warily. "It's called a Uniform Transfers to Minors account. For Emma and Lucas." He slid the paper across to me. "I'm putting in the equivalent value of the Buick, what it was actually worth, not what the dealership gave us for trade-in. It'll be held in trust until they're 21. I looked at the document, noting the substantial sum listed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I took something that wasn't mine to take," Trevor said simply. "I can't give it back to you directly, but I can make sure its value stays in the family, for the next generation." For the first time since this whole situation began, I felt a genuine softening toward my son. This wasn't just an apology, it was an acknowledgement of the wrong, and a concrete attempt to make amends. "That's a meaningful gesture, Trevor," I said. "I appreciate it." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "This is for you." "What is it?" I asked, taking the small device. "Every photo and video I could find of you and Dad with the Buick." His voice grew quieter. "I had Mom go through the old family albums and scan anything with the car in it. There are some good ones from that trip to Maine you mentioned. Tears pricked at my eyes unexpectedly. You remembered that? Of course I did. You said it was your 35th anniversary trip. Trevor looked down at his hands. I should have realized how important that car was to you. Not just as transportation, but as a connection to Dad. In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the sensitive boy Trevor had once been, before adulthood and career ambition had hardened him. The son who had cried when his father taught him to ride a bike, not from the skinned knee but from the pride of accomplishment. Your father would be proud of you right now, I said softly. Trevor looked up, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. You think so? I know so. Not for the grand gestures, I clarified, but for acknowledging your mistake and trying to make it right. That's what he always valued most: integrity. Trevor swallowed hard. I miss him. So do I said. Every day. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the shared grief creating a bridge between us that had been missing in our recent interactions. Mom, Trevor finally said. About the other things, the house, the will, all that. I want you to know that Melissa and I have talked, and we both realize we've been controlling. We're going to do better. I hope so, I said. Because those documents at Harold's office are real, Trevor. Not just threats. His eyes widened slightly. You actually filed them? They're being held in escrow, I explained. Whether they're filed or not depends on what happens next. What do you mean? I mean that one gesture, however meaningful, doesn't erase a pattern. I met his gaze directly. I need to see consistent respect for my autonomy going forward. Trevor nodded slowly. That's fair. And I promise, from my side at least, things will be different. What about Melissa? I asked. He grimaced slightly. She's coming around. It's harder for her to see it, I think. She's always been the organizer, the planner. Just like her mother, I said with a small smile. Richard had always joked that Melissa and I butted heads because we were too similar, both of us determined to be in control. She means well, Trevor offered. I know she does. You both do. I leaned forward. But Trevor, meaning well isn't enough if the impact of your actions is harmful. That's what I need you both to understand. I get it now, he said. I really do. I wanted to believe him. The effort he'd made with the Buick suggested he was sincere. But I'd raised this man from infancy. I knew his patterns, his tendency to make grand gestures in the moment, and then revert to old habits once the crisis had passed. We'll see, I said simply. After Trevor left, I sat in my living room for a long time, turning the USB drive over in my hands. Part of me wanted to plug it in immediately, to see those memories of Richard and our life together. But another part hesitated, knowing the photos would bring both joy and pain. Finally, I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. The first image that appeared was from our wedding day. Richard standing proudly beside the brand new Buick he'd saved for years to buy, his arm around my waist as we prepared to drive away from the church. I was 23 in that photo, Richard 25. So young, with no idea of the life ahead of us, the children we'd raise, the challenges we'd face, the 40 years we'd share before cancer took him far too soon. As I scrolled through the photos, I felt Richard's presence so strongly, it was almost tangible. Here we were loading suitcases for a family vacation, the children small and excited in the back seat. There was Richard washing the car in our driveway, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something I'd said from behind the camera. And there, the last photo taken of us together with the Buick anniversary trip to Maine 5 years ago, just months before his diagnosis. We stood beside the car at a scenic overlook, the Atlantic Ocean stretching behind us, Richard's arm around my shoulders as it had been in that first wedding photo. His hair was silver now, his face lined, but his smile was the same, and the love in his eyes when he looked at me that hadn't changed in 40 years. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I stared at the image. "Oh, Richard," I whispered, "I miss you so much." In that moment, I could almost hear his voice, gentle but firm as it had always been. "Don't let them take your independence, Ellie." That's not what I meant when I asked them to look after you. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve settling over me. Trevor had taken a step in the right direction, but this wasn't just about him or the car anymore. This was about establishing the terms of my life going forward, how my children would treat me, how decisions would be made, how my autonomy would be respected. The next day, I called Melissa and invited her to lunch. If Trevor could make an effort to understand, perhaps his sister could too. And if not, well, Harold was still holding those documents. We met at Riverside Cafe, a quiet spot overlooking the park, where my children had played as youngsters. Melissa arrived 5 minutes late, slightly flustered. Sorry, Mom, work was crazy this morning. No problem, I assured her. I'm just glad you could make it. After ordering, Melissa got straight to the point, another trait she'd inherited from me. Trevor told me about his visit, about the Buick buyer and the trust fund for the kids. She studied me across the table. That was a nice gesture, don't you think? It was, I agreed. Thoughtful and meaningful. So, she hesitated. Does that mean you're reconsidering the other things? The house, the will? I sighed internally. Of course, she would focus on that aspect. Melissa, this isn't a transaction. Trevor didn't buy his way back into my good graces with one gesture. Her face fell. But he's really trying, Mom. I know he is. And I appreciate that. I reached across the table to take her hand. But what I need from both of you is ongoing respect for my autonomy, not just damage control after crossing a line. We do respect you, she insisted. Do you? I asked gently. When was the last time you asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I should do? Melissa opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, a frown creasing her forehead. Last month when Lucas had his school play, you told me what time to arrive and where to sit. You didn't ask if I wanted to attend or if I had other plans. But of course you wanted to be there, she said, looking confused. You're his grandmother. Yes. And I did want to be there. But the point is, you assumed rather than asked. That's such a small thing, she protested. It's a pattern, I corrected. Small things that add up to treating me like someone who doesn't get to make her own choices. Melissa sat back, her expression troubled. I never thought of it that way. I know you didn't, I said softly. That's why we're having this conversation. Melissa stirred her iced tea, the clink of her spoon against the glass filling the silence between us. I could almost see the thoughts churning behind her eyes, the same expression she'd worn as a child, working through a difficult math problem. I've always been the organizer, she said finally. The one who makes sure everything runs smoothly. For Paul, for the kids, at work. I know, I said. You get that from me. A small smile tugged at her lips. Dad used to say we were two peas in a very bossy pod. Even people you love. She flinched slightly at the word controlling. I don't think of it that way. No one does, I said gently. We tell ourselves we're helping, making things easier, taking care of details. But when we don't give others the chance to make their own choice, 7 choices we think are wrong, we're not respecting them as independent beings. Melissa looked down at her hands. Like when Trevor sold your car. Exactly like that, I confirmed. But also like when you reorganized my kitchen without asking, or when you and Trevor discuss my finances as if I'm not in the room, or when you both decided I shouldn't drive to visit Aunt Sarah last winter because it was too far. We were worried about you driving 4 hours alone, Melissa defended. I've been driving since before you were born, I reminded her. I've made that trip dozens of times, but instead of asking if I wanted company or suggesting alternatives, you simply announced I wouldn't be going. I didn't realize it felt that way to you, she said quietly. That's why I'm telling you now, I replied. Because I love you, Melissa. I love both my children more than anything in this world. But I won't be managed or controlled, even out of love. Our food arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of our conversation. As we ate, I watched my daughter process what I'd said. Melissa had always been more reflective than Trevor, more willing to consider other perspectives. So what happens now? She asked eventually. With the house, the will, all of it? That depends, I said, on whether you and Trevor can show me that you understand what needs to change. And if we do? Then nothing changes with the legal documents. We go back to the arrangement we had before, but with clearer boundaries and better communication. Melissa nodded slowly. And if we don't? I hope it doesn't come to that. I smiled, feeling cautiously optimistic. That's all I ask. As we finished our lunch, the conversation shifted to lighter topics: Emma's upcoming soccer tournament, Paul's new project at work, a book Melissa had recently enjoyed. For the first time in months, I felt like we were talking as equals, not as caretaker and charge. When we parted outside the restaurant, Melissa hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, "for not seeing what we were doing." "I know, sweetheart," I said, returning her embrace. "We'll figure it out together." The next 2 weeks passed quietly. True to their word, both Trevor and Melissa made visible efforts to change their approach. Trevor called to ask if I needed anything from the hardware store, rather than showing up unannounced to fix things around my house. Melissa invited me to Sunday dinner, rather than informing me when to arrive. Small changes, but meaningful ones. Then came the real test. My sister Sarah called with news that her husband, Frank, had suffered a minor heart attack. He was stable, but she was shaken and needed support. "I'm coming down," I told her immediately. "I can leave tomorrow morning." "Are you sure, Ellie?" Sarah asked. "It's a long drive, and Frank is going to be fine. The doctor said it was very minor." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "You were there for me when Richard was sick. I'm going to be there for you now." After hanging up, I began making preparations for the 4-hour drive to Sarah's home in Ridgemont. I'd just finished packing an overnight bag when my phone rang. Trevor's name flashed on the screen. "Hi, Mom," he greeted me. "Melissa just called. She said Aunt Sarah's husband is in the hospital?" "Uncle Frank had a mild heart attack," I confirmed. "He's stable, but I'm driving down tomorrow to be with Sarah for a few days." There was a brief pause. "Driving down? That's what? 4 hours each way?" Here it comes, I thought. The old pattern reasserting itself. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I've made the drive many times." Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear Trevor's internal struggle. "Would you like some company?" he asked finally. "I could take Friday off, drive down with you. Or if you'd prefer to go alone, that's completely fine too. Just offering. And drive safely." "I will," I promised, touched by his restraint. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, a strange mixture of emotions swirling through me. Pride in my son's growth, gratitude for the respect he'd shown, and a bittersweet wish that Richard could see this momentor son learning one of life's most difficult lessons: letting the people you love make their own choices, even when those choices worry you. My phone buzzed with a text message from Melissa. "Just heard about Uncle Frank. Do you need anything before your trip tomorrow? Can drop off snacks or audiobooks if you want. Love you." No demands. No unsolicited advice. Just an offer of support. Perhaps my lesson had worked after all. The drive to Ridgemont the next day was peaceful. Spring was in full bloom, painting the countryside in vibrant greens and splashes of wildflower color. I thought about Richard, about how he would have enjoyed this drive. He'd always loved the open road, the freedom of movement, the changing landscapes. "You'd be proud of them, Richard," I said aloud to the empty car. "They're trying. They're learning." I spent 3 days with Sarah, helping her navigate the paperwork and decisions that come with a medical crisis, no matter how minor. Frank was indeed recovering well, but the episode had shaken them both, forcing them to confront mortality in a way they hadn't before. "It's different when it's sudden," Sarah confided as we sat in her garden, watching evening settle over the neighborhood. "With Richard, at least you had time to prepare, to say goodbye." "Every loss is difficult in its own way," I said, squeezing her hand. "But Frank is going to be fine. This is just a warning to take better care of himself." Sarah nodded, her eyes drifting to the horizon. Trevor called me yesterday. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. He did? Mm-hmm. Wanted to check on Frank, of course, but also asked about you. If you seemed okay, if you were managing the stress. She gave me a sideways glance. He mentioned there had been some tension between you recently. Did he tell you about the car? I asked. He did. Sarah shook her head. I couldn't believe it when he told me. That boy has always had more confidence than sense sometimes. I laughed. He comes by it honestly. Richard was the same way at that age. True. Sarah agreed with a smile. But what struck me was how Trevor talked about it. He said you'd taught him an important lesson about respect and boundaries. That he was trying to do better. Warmth spread through my chest. He is trying. Both of them are. Good, Sarah said firmly. Because you're the most capable person I know, Ellie. Always have been. If anyone tried to manage me the way he described, I'd have knocked them into next Tuesday. I chuckled. I considered it, but I decided a more strategic approach might be more effective. Always the chess player, Sarah said affectionately. Richard used to say you were 3 moves ahead of everyone else. Not always, I admitted. But in this case, I think my approach worked. When I returned home 3 days later, I found my house spotless, the refrigerator stocked with fresh groceries, and a vase of spring flowers on the kitchen table. A note in Melissa's handwriting sat propped against the vase. Thought you might be tired after your trip. Cleaned up a bit and got some essentials. Call if you need anything. Love. M.T. Not, we took care of everything. Or, we handled it for you. Just a simple gesture of support, acknowledging that I might be tired but not assuming I was incapable. Progress. The following weekend was the classic car show where Edward Mercer, the man who had purchased my Buick, had agreed to meet me. Trevor offered to drive me there, and this time, I accepted. The showground was crowded with enthusiasts admiring vintage vehicles of every description. Trevor navigated us through the throng, consulting a map he'd printed out. Mr. Mercer said he'd be in Section C, near the judging stand, he explained. His display includes 5 Buicks from that era, including yours. I noted his hesitation on the last word, the acknowledgement that the car had been mine, not his to dispose of. We found Edward Mercer easily enough. A tall, distinguished man in his 60s, he stood proudly beside a row of immaculately maintained Buicks, including the familiar navy blue sedan that had been Richard's pride and joy. Mrs. Winters, he greeted me warmly, extending his hand. Edward Mercer, your son has told me so much about you. Thank you for agreeing to meet, I said, shaking his hand while my eyes drifted to the Buick. It looked exactly the same, perhaps even a bit shinier under Mercer's careful maintenance. It's my pleasure, he assured me. Trevor explained the unusual circumstances of the sale. I'm happy to give you some time with the car. Trevor hung back as Mercer led me to the Buick, opening the driver's side door with a flourish. Would you like to sit inside? I nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak past the lump in my throat. Sliding into the familiar seat felt like stepping back in time. The leather, the dashboard, the particular way the steering wheel felt beneath my handsol of it brought Richard rushing back to me. She's a beauty, Mercer said appreciatively. One of the best examples of this model I've seen. Your husband must have taken excellent care of it. He did, I managed. It was his pride and joy. Mercer nodded understanding. Cars like this, they're more than just transportation. They're memories, connections to the people we've loved. I looked up at him, surprised by his perception. My wife and I restored a 1967 Mustang together, he explained. After she passed, that car became my most treasured possession, not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. Exactly, I said softly. Mercer stepped back, giving me a moment alone in the car. I ran my hands over the familiar dashboard, remembering Richard sitting where I now sat, his hands confident on the wheel, his profile strong against the passing landscape. So many journeys in this car. So many conversations, laughs, comfortable silences. After a few minutes, I stepped out, composed once more. "Thank you for this," I said to Mercer. "It means a great deal to be able to say a proper goodbye." Trevor stepped forward, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mom, Mr. Mercer and I have been talking, and, well, he has a proposal." Mercer nodded. "Mrs. Winters, I collect these cars because I love them. Yes, but also because I believe they should be preserved for the stories they carry. Your Buick has a wonderful story, 40 years with one family, all those memories." I nodded, unsure where this was heading. "I'd like to offer you arrangement," Mercer continued. "The car would remain in my collection, where it will be properly maintained and preserved. But you would have visitation rights, so to speak. You could come see it any time, take it for a drive occasionally if you wish. And," Trevor added, "Mr. Mercer has agreed that when he eventually sells his collection or, well, when he's no longer able to maintain it, you or I would have first right of refusal to buy the Buick back." I looked between them, momentarily speechless. "That's very generous." "It's the right thing to do," Mercer said simply. "These old cars, they're more than metal and machinery. They're vessels for our histories." "We've already drawn up the agreement," Trevor said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "It's legally binding. Mr. Mercer's lawyer and our family attorney, Harold, worked on it together." I took the envelope, touched beyond words by the effort this represented. Not just from Mercer, who owed me nothing, but from Trevor, who had gone to such lengths to make amends. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." He pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to me. Inside was a keychain, a miniature replica of the Buick, exquisitely detailed, with a small plaque attached that read, "Winters Family, 1980, 2020. "I had it custom made," Trevor explained, "so you'd always have a piece of it with you." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to my eyes. This wasn't just about the car anymore. This was Trevor showing me, in every way he could, that he understood what he'd done wrong and was committed to making it right. "It's perfect," I whispered, closing my hand around the small metal car. After saying goodbye to Mercer and arranging for a future visit, Trevor and I walked back to his BMW in companionable silence. It wasn't until we were driving home that he spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did," he said, eyes on the road. "With the car, I mean." "Oh?" I encouraged. "After Dad died, I felt responsible. For you, for everything he left behind." Trevor's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. "He was always the one who handled the big things, the house repairs, the car maintenance, the financial planning. And suddenly, that was all on my shoulders." "Trevor," I said gently, "your father didn't handle those things alone. We did them together. And after he died, I continued handling them. You just didn't see it." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "I know that now. But at the time, all I could think was that Dad had asked me to take care of you, and I was determined to do it right." "By taking over," I observed. "By taking over," he agreed with a rueful smile. "Because that's what I thought taking care meant. Doing things for you, making decisions, handling problems before they arose. And now? Now I understand that real care means respecting your choices, supporting you when you ask for it, stepping back when you don't." He shook his head. "It seems so obvious now, but I couldn't see it before." "Growth often works that way," I said. "The most important lessons seem obvious in hindsight." We drove in silence for a while, the spring countryside rolling past our windows. I thought about Richard, about what he would make of all this. He'd always said our children were reflections of us. Trevor with my determination and Richard's confidence, Melissa with Richard's compassion, and my organizational zeal. "Mom," Trevor said as we neared home. "About those documents at Harold's office." "Yes?" I studied my son's profile, so like his father's, yet distinctly his own. "Thank you, Trevor, that means a great deal to me." The following Monday, I visited Harold Bernstein's office again. He greeted me with his usual warmth, bushy eyebrows rising in question as I took a seat across from his desk. "Have you made a decision about those documents, Eleanor?" he asked. "I have," I confirmed. "I'd like you to destroy the power of attorney changes and the property transfer papers." Harold nodded, making a note. "And the will updates?" I hesitated. "Keep those for now. Not because I don't trust my children, but because it's sensible to review these things periodically anyway." "Very wise," Harold approved. "And may I ask what prompted this decision? When we last spoke, you seemed quite determined." "Let's just say my children have shown remarkable growth recently," I said with a small smile. "They're learning to respect boundaries." "I'm glad to hear it," Harold said sincerely. "Family conflicts over these matters can be devastating." "They can," I agreed. "But sometimes a little strategic planning can prevent those conflicts before they become irreparable." Harold chuckled. "Richard always said you were the strategist in the family." "He did?" This was news to me. "Oh yes. He'd come in here to discuss estate planning, and half the time he'd say, 'Eleanor's already thought 3 moves ahead on this one, Harold.'" The older man smiled at the memory. "He admired that about you enormously." Warmth spread through me at this unexpected glimpse of Richard's thoughts. "We balanced each other," I said softly. "And I'll update your will with the minor revisions we discussed, leaving the primary beneficiaries unchanged." "Thank you, Harold." As I left his office, I felt a sense of closure. The game I'd been playing, the lesson I'd been teaching, had reached its conclusion. Not with winners and losers, but with understanding and growth on all sides. That evening, I invited both my children to dinner at my home. They arrived together, bearing dessert and a bottle of wine, their expressions curious but relaxed. Over Richard's favorite pot roast recipe, I told them about my visit to Harold's office. "So you're not changing anything?" Melissa asked, relief evident in her voice. "I've made some minor updates to my will, which is simply good practice," I explained. "But no, I'm not changing the primary arrangements we'd agreed upon years ago." Trevor set down his fork. "Because we've shown you that we understand what went wrong?" "Partly," I acknowledged. "But also because I believe in second chances. Your father always said that how we recover from our mistakes says more about us than the mistakes themselves." "Dad was wise that way," Melissa said with a soft smile. "He was," I agreed. "And he would be very proud of both of you right now." "For finally acting like adults?" Trevor asked wryly. "For being willing to grow," I corrected. "That doesn't stop when you reach adulthood, you know. Some people live their entire lives without ever examining their behavior or changing their patterns." We continued our meal, the conversation flowing naturally to other topics: work projects, the children's activities, plans for the summer. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by my children. Not as a problem to manage or a responsibility to bear, but as a whole person with agency and wisdom of my own. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with coffee and the apple crumble Melissa had brought, Trevor raised his cup in a small toast. "To Mom," he said, "who taught us an important lesson in the most effective way possible by letting us experience the consequences of our actions." Melissa raised her cup as well. "To Mom, who's smarter and more strategic than both of us combined." I laughed, lifting my own cup. "To family. Imperfect, challenging, and always worth the effort." Later, after they had gone home, and I was alone in the quiet house that held 40 years of memories, I took out the small velvet box Trevor had given me. The miniature Buick keychain caught the lamplight, gleaming like a tiny treasure. "We did well with them, Richard," I said to the empty room. "They still have a lot to learn, but their hearts are good." And somewhere, I was certain, Richard was smiling, proud of his children for learning, and proud of me for teaching them the lesson they needed in a way they could truly understand. The car was gone, but what it represented: respect, independence, the dignity of making my own choices, that remained, stronger than before. In the end, that was the victory that mattered most.